The Tech It Up Talk podcast aspires to educate, inform, and inspire educators from teachers to school leaders on tips, tools, and resources to support the integration of technology into classroom instruction.
You ready? Here we go.
You're listening to Tech It Up Talk with Dr. Mac, your host with the most passion for supporting educators from teachers to school leaders with the integration of technology into instruction. In this episode of Tech It Up Talk, we are discussing empowering student voices with one of my favorite educational applications, Flipgrid. And joining me in this discussion, I have the pleasure of having Miss Sara Rodriguez. Sara has a passion for teaching STEM and feels that it is important to help students see the world through their eyes as they grow and develop into lifelong learners. As an educator, she has enjoyed the challenges associated with designing meaningful lessons, integrating technology into her lab, and organizing events such as workshops for her fellow teachers. One of the things that she's most motivated to do is seeing other teachers learn from her tips. She has a love for creating meaningful connections between the classroom and our society, and Flipgrid has pushed the door wide open for her and her students. And so I am honored to have a rock star teacher to join me today, guys, and that is Miss Sara Rodriguez. Hi.
Hi, Dr. Mac. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited, and actually it is my honor to be here with you today.
Hey, it's my honor too. Look, I love having teachers come on and share their voice. I know we're going to be talking about student voices and empowering them, but teacher voices matter too. And so we need to hear from you guys to help support our leaders and other educators to really create those meaningful learning experiences. So I am glad to have you here join me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the platform to share. And actually for having me today. Amazing.
Yes. And so I want you to just kind of think really quick. If you had one word to just describe your year, or I should say past 2 years in education since COVID has made its presence, what would it be?
Wow. One word. Oh, that's a tough one. But I would have to be efficient. Efficient is my word. Times were hard, if to say the least, and I know that my fellow teachers listening to this will back me up on this. It's been a hard few years, but being efficient and working really, really hard was probably the tip of the iceberg for my years, and we're reaping the rewards now.
I love that. I love to hear the positivity that comes out of challenges. So I always say challenges are opportunities for success. And just share with us your background as an educator.
I am a 5th grade science teacher with integration of STEM. And of course, I've been pushing for technology integration in my classroom. This is year 5 going on year 6 of teaching. And of course, there's been a soft spot in my heart for teaching. I wasn't always a teacher, so that's why I'm barely, getting into the rhythm of teaching. And of course, this has always been my passion. And I'm so glad that I finally made the decision to come back to the classroom. I was working at a law firm before I became a teacher, so transitioning back from that was different, to say the least. But of course, I was always meant to be in the classroom, and I'm so glad that I made the switch when I did.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a major switch from working in the law firm and coming back to the classroom. So I'm sure there's two different worlds. I think a lot of people, when they work in a different space outside of education, it's a completely different world when they step into the education arena. So welcome back, and we're glad to have you on.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back. And of course, it's been amazing, to say the least.
The goal for this episode is really for us to discuss empowering student voice. And today we're going to talk about empowering student voice with Flipgrid, one of my favorites. And so I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. So just as a classroom teacher, can you share some challenges that students face in the classroom?
Right now, and I can say this with experience, students are facing technological problems because we are not a one-to-one anymore. So having access to technology is really hard now. And the students went through the pandemic. They got really into technology. We were one-to-one, and then being back face-to-face, students are not one-to-one anymore, especially, in our lower grades or elementary band. We don't have a one-to-one anymore. So, digital divide or digital equity, and of course, lack of technology in the classroom is one of the things that students are facing right now, above everything else that is going on in the world.
Can you share why student voice is important?
Yes. Student voice not only, sets the tone for our classrooms. I can say this for experience. My students feel prideful and they take ownership of their own work when they know that their voice was heard, not only by me, but by others. And I feel like sometimes as teachers, we want to do all the heavy load and the hard work, but it's actually more meaningful when it comes from our students. And we have to take that step back and let them do the talking, because the more students talk, the more they're learning. And that students are learning when you hear them talk. So I'm so glad that my students are able to have a voice and, build their own community. And it's not my responsibility only, but it's also theirs. And I'm so glad that they have a voice in my classroom.
Oh, I love that. And so share with us, what are some benefits of a teacher promoting or empowering student voice in the classroom?
I would have to say that a benefit of having student or empowering student voice would have to be that students feel included, not only in their learning, but also in their school community. It is very important they spend most of their days or time with us, our teachers, and their school community. And if they feel like they have a voice and a say of what happens around them, it's very important to include them in all the decision makings, not only in the small things, but in the big things. I feel like me as a teacher, I used to only include my students when we make up our rules, for the year, but their voice matters with everything in my classroom. What topics we hit, what kind of activities we're going to get into. I feel like having student voice is super powerful, and when you give them a platform to do it, it's even more meaningful.
All right. And so let's kind of move on talking about a platform that we can give them to help support that process, in which we're going to be talking about Flipgrid today. So for people who may not know what Flipgrid is, can you kind of share what is Flipgrid?
Yeah, so Flipgrid has to be one of the most amazing platforms out there for student engagement and, of course, for student voice. I feel like my students are super empowered when they get to do Flipgrid, and Flipgrid is a audio-visual tech tool that allows students to record themselves, and of course, they have a lot of cool little techie integrations like stickers and backgrounds and a lot of cool eye-catching things that students are super pulled by when they get to interact with Flipgrid. So that's just, a very small little introduction of what Flipgrid is. And of course, we'll get into all the other specifics later.
Well, we can start with how do you use Flipgrid in your classroom?
Yeah, so I use Flipgrid mainly to do student teachbacks. That's how I started using Flipgrid. I was just like, what? I have a lot of little teachers in my classroom, and I want to give them the space and the platform to, do the little teaching activities. So that's how I started with Flipgrid, and then it just became this big, huge spiral of using it in my classroom daily. Before it was just, once a week when I had time to integrate the tech tool. But then it started, every day my students were like, when are we going to get to do some Flipgrids? And it was really nice for me to incorporate it in everything. Read aloud. Students were reading out loud, using that as a platform to read to younger students, like in other grade levels, doing projects. So especially for my students that were virtual, having them jump on video and actually seeing their faces was amazing to me. When my face-to-face students were able to see my virtual students and, give them feedback. So those were the things that were super impactful when I first started using Flipgrid in my classroom. And now it's just taken a big, huge step, and and making sure that my students are always heard, even when we don't have time. As teachers, we have to teach to a certain degree of TEKS and stuff, so we kind of put their voice to the back. And I feel like Flipgrid gives me the opportunity for my students to always have a way to communicate with me, even when they're at home, during Christmas break and Thanksgiving break and spring break and all those times that I don't get to see them, or after they leave. Sometimes they have some ideas they want to show me, or even just random thoughts that come into their brain. And sometimes we're like, oh, we'll talk about that later when we finish our class, and then they're out the door and they didn't really get to talk to me. So Flipgrid gives them the voice that they've always been wanting, and it allows them to communicate not only with me, but with their peers, with the parents, with their school community. It's just amazing to hear.
Wow, yes. And so for our teachers out there, what are some instructional ways that teachers can empower student voice with Flipgrid?
I feel like if they use this tool, to have like student-led conferences, I feel like that's super impactful when the students are able to take pride in their data and present that to their parents or the admin team. That's huge. Student feedback for anything, their not only data, but their assignments, giving student feedback to other students. That's super impactful. And I feel like if as teachers we moderate what they can share, what they can't share, I feel like students are more willing to do the work in Flipgrid. And I feel like students, timid students per se, I have a lot of timid students that never say anything during the classroom, but when they jump on Flipgrid, their faces just light up and they share things that we didn't even know about them, whether it be personal or in school. And I feel like if teachers just integrated even in the morning for like morning routine, have them jump on Flipgrid and share what they had, for breakfast, or, do a do now, how do you do the steps for your do now? Or what did you do this weekend? Was there anything important? Or is there anything going on in your life that you want to share with your peers? I feel like students love sharing things that go on at home, and sometimes we don't get the time to really hear their voices. So those would probably be some of my tips for teachers to integrate Flipgrid. Maybe just kind of ease into it, have them explore Flipgrid without any specifics, have them jump on Flipgrid and play with the features and see what you get as responses. Sometimes, those first few videos that I ever got were the funniest things, to me. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I always tell teachers, with any technology tool, you don't want to use it your first time, expect it to be the greatest thing ever to work perfectly. You have to scaffold that process in, but yourself getting comfortable with it. Your students, of course, they're little explorers anyway. They're going to jump right in and start exploring the features, and you will be pleasantly surprised with some of the responses and feedback you get to students. And I love that you shared that our students who are really quiet, who are kind of, they're not any behavior disruptions, but they're kind of in the background, and I like to say passively engaged. And so we really don't know if they're mastering the content, if they're really capturing the concept that's being taught. And so I love that Flipgrid offers that opportunity for so many students to just be able to kind of share and not have to necessarily speak in front of everyone, and kind of share to themselves, and you can moderate how you want that to look in your classroom as a teacher. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I think those are some great supports for teachers. The student feedback one, I think, is a huge component. Not only are we empowering their voice, we're also helping our students be able to build student agency and advocate for themselves. And us practicing speaking and being able to do that definitely helps, even if we're just having fun. I just think of myself as a kid. I wasn't really, the one that's going to speak and stand up or say anything. I was a little quiet, especially when it came to school. I was scared what someone else would think of what I may have said, and so I wasn't always front and center with being the first one to respond. And if there was a tool like this way back then, I would have, maybe ease my way in to be more of an advocate for myself and be more confident in my speaking, my learning, and then my teacher can also gauge, the level of my understanding. And so, this is definitely one of my favorite all-time tools.
I love that you said that, the student levels. We do TELPAS. My students have to do not only reading, but also speaking. And this is a great tool to gauge during the year, how my students are progressing in their learning. And I feel like, they get to see and practice over and over again. And I love that you talked about, how user-friendly Flipgrid is. Literally, I didn't have to do much when I introduced Flipgrid to my students. They literally taught me some things that I didn't even know Flipgrid had, because like you said, they're little explorers and they're always looking for things. And of course, they're little techies at heart, and they move things. Look, we have this feature. Look at this feature. Did you see this? And I was mind blown. I'm here trying to present this cool thing that I thought was amazing. I thought I already knew about, but they came back and turned it around and showed me a lot of things. And it was amazing to see. And I loved just seeing their faces when they get that time to speak. Like you said, when you were young, you didn't have that platform. And I have several students that are super shy and super timid. But when I see their responses on Flipgrid, I see another person that has never come out. And, sometimes they were never that person to raise their hand and say, hey, I want to answer. And after we started practicing with Flipgrid and, they were doing responses, and at the beginning, they were all private just to me. Nobody was able to see those. At the end of the year, they were the first ones to say, share mine. I want everyone to see me and hear me. And, or they would say, can I be first at answering? Or, can I teach so-and-so about the features? And as we progress through the years, Flipgrid has integrated a bunch of new things. Like now I can walk around with my phone, and if I want to Flipgrid something, I just pop the app open and walk around my room, and I can create a video with my students. Before, you have to be kind of tied to the computer or a desktop to be able to do the Flipgrids. And it was kind of hard when you want the students to work at home, and if they don't have a computer, that's hard. But
Right.
now there's been so many things that they've come up with that we didn't have before when it first started. So I'm so glad that they continue to hear teachers' voices and student voices and feedback about the tool, and they keep making this platform or this tech tool super amazing and teacher/student friendly.
Wow, yes. And so we're about to jump right into some of those things now. And so let's go ahead and move on to my second segment of the show, which I like to call Get Your Tech Together. And so we're going to get our tech together with Flipgrid today and talk more specifically about some of the more technical ways teachers can use the features of Flipgrid to empower student voice. And so, Sarah, can you just share with us what are some of those specific features of Flipgrid that would really help support teachers and supporting and empowering student voice?
So one of the features that I really, really like is the integration of a split screen. You're able to split your screen, and if I'm teaching a specific unit and the vocabulary is super heavy, I love that I'm able to record myself teaching on one side, and I'm able to kind of like write on the other what I'm, my bullet points. And of course, sometimes you need to practice a little bit. And Flipgrid has the ability for you to cut and clip your segments. So if there's something that you didn't really like at the very beginning, you can always record something else and drag and drop. So, before you would have to go to another program or another tech tool to do all these editing things. The editing feature is super amazing. I'm able to drag and drop, put in music now. Before, if there was any sound in the background, my students would be able to hear it. Now they have a music integration where you can put, slow jams in the back and, ease into a vocabulary unit. And of course, a lot of, one of the really nice features that they have is the backgrounds. So you're able to create your own background and put it in the back, or you can create your own little filter to put on top of yourself. I always like to enter my classroom with a nice joke or a funny before I go into, heavy material for the week or for the month, and my students look forward to hearing me with my little jokes, and it's so nice to just pop here, pop there, the little stickers that they have. So they have a lot of cool features, and we would be here all day if I got into literally all of them, but just the few, like the little feature for split screen, notepad, the integration of notes, and which other one? They have cool filters too. There's so many. I am in love with all things Flipgrid. So like I said, we would spend here most of our time just talking about the features.
Yeah, one of my, I think, favorite ones that I like to share with teachers, especially for our students who are still learning the language or maybe need reading supports. And so one of the great things about Flipgrid is that you can insert a prompt, and your prompt can be either text, or you can give a video prompt or they can watch a video. And so you can have different ways to kind of engage them for what they're about to do, so you can get the product that you want back. And if you're leveraging text, and it's heavy text, they have the immersive reader feature that I really love, in which teachers can go in and well, not teachers, but our students can go in and use to really help support their reading or their language. And so you can invert the screen, you can make it bigger, zoom in a little bit, just make sure that our students who need a little more reading supports have that accommodation available for them readily and built into the platform. And also, it has the ability to translate. And so if you have students who are still learning and adapting to the language as they're learning the English language, they can still translate the content into their language, which really helps. I had a Spanish teacher. He taught high school Spanish, and he started using Flipgrid. And even though we're talking about students who are learning English, even though students who are learning Spanish, he would use it to really help and leverage the transcript component, because when they're talking, the closed caption, you can go to the bottom to kind of help understand what they're saying. And I had another teacher, she did teach a course where she's helping students adjust and learn language. And so they would use the video feature to practice enunciation of sounds. And so they can see themselves and how they were saying the sounds, if they were moving their mouth a certain way. And so she would use it as a measurement tool. So like, you're right, like the features of Flipgrid are amazing. And because there are so many different ways, and even the smallest thing, we're still empowering a student's voice. Even, just giving that prompt and just having them respond to a question, you're giving them a voice to be heard and to be seen in the classroom.
Yes, of course. And also, I have students that don't want to be on video. So don't think that your students have to always be on video in Flipgrid. They also have the audio only, where they get to respond without being, seen. So those super shy students that are really not ready yet to be seen on camera, they still get to shine, even if it's just you listening to their voice. I think, progressively they get a little brave. Sometimes they do they have that background filter that kind of blurs them out. So that's second step of them coming on camera. And then at the end of the year, maybe you'll see them splitting the screen and talking and doing bullet points.
Right.
So like you said, all the features that they have of integration for language, for scaffolding, it's empowering, not only for our student, but for teachers. This tool goes hand in hand if you have the technology to pull it together in your classroom.
Something else that I like that they added in that could really support students is the screen share. And so now, even like you were talking about students who may not want to be seen on the screen, well, we don't have to see them. We can just hear them, and they can navigate and narrate it in a concept, or maybe it's a math course and they're walking us through how to solve a math problem. Or maybe they had a presentation they had and they're just have that image up that they're sharing, or their report. And so, there's so many different ways that you can leverage it that, it makes it awesome and amazing. And it's like endless possibilities in which teachers can really find opportunities to really engage our students. And so I definitely love that. What would be one of your students' favorite features of Flipgrid?
One of the favorites would have to be the stickers. My students love to add stickers to their prompts. And of course, the background. They've added some cool, graphics now. And they have the one with the, what's that game all students are always playing? The Roblox.
Oh
You
my
know,
goodness, my daughter
yeah,
is on Roblox. Great.
yeah,
Yes.
so they have, all these cool backgrounds that are super eye-catchy for students, and that's one of the biggest things that they love, using. The background blur, anything that they've come up with has been spot on for my students. Every single new thing that they've added, like they've added this pencil where you become a pencil. So
Oh,
my
really?
students are like, so in my classroom, we have what you call a writing Wednesday, and my students, sometimes have a Telpass prompt, or they have, I sometimes let them do, free writing. And one of my students loves the pencil because one day he did a whole story about being a pencil, like going through class to class and being the pencil, and now he can actually be the pencil. So he,
I love it.
he went on this big huge rant of being the pencil, and he's like, my point is so sharp, but oh no, when you touch me to the paper, I break, and oh, to the sharpener I go, and brr, brr, brr. And while he's doing this, he's an actual pencil, and it's just so funny, because it takes your little eyes and your mouth. So he's making these expressions, and you get to see the creativity that your kids come up with a filter. Like, who knew he would come up with this big huge story about a pencil, and now he has a way to be an actual pencil. So literally anything they come up with is useful, and it's super comical at times.
Yeah, sometimes I think teachers think about those little small things as being interruptions to the learning process, but it really taps into students being inspired to want to kind of engage more and, like you said, be more creative with their learning process. So, like, even a sticker or changing your background can really make you want to, dive into the learning a little bit more than what you probably would have before. And so I love it. Look, I need to see this pencil video. So if you want to share, I would
I will
love to see
share
him
it with
being
you.
pencil.
I will
love
share
to
it with
see him
you.
being pencil. That is so amazing. And so, yeah, I love it. So there's so many different things in Flipgrid. And one thing I definitely want to share with our listeners, if you are a new teacher and you've never used Flipgrid before and you just want to get started or just kind of see what it's like, or maybe you're not as that creative teacher that comes with those cool ideas for activities, they have a place where you can go and discover what other teachers are doing. And so, and you can even leverage and copy those lessons to yourself, and you can edit them and make them for your own needs. But you don't have to be a master to get started. There's so much support that is on the site that can give you ideas, and you can filter it by your content level, by your grade level. And there's so many different ways for you to find opportunities to empower your student voice. And so I definitely want to say, before I ask Sara to share her last tips with us, is, give it a chance. If you haven't tried it yet, find opportunities to engage your students. You'll be pleasantly surprised at how much they will love the feature, and also give you more of what you're looking for. There was one more thing I forgot about that I like, and you mentioned it earlier, Sara. It was the feedback. In there, you're able to give student feedback, and so you can give the students feedback, and students can give each other feedback if you wanted to. And it's a strong way of enhancing your classroom environment, and also teaching students how to receive constructive feedback and give constructive feedback. And so it definitely helps with building a great community. And so we're going to go ahead and end our show with some top tips from Miss Sara Rodriguez on empowering student voice with Flipgrid. So, Miss Sara, if you don't mind just sharing top 3 tips you share with other teachers to walk away with to empower students' voice with Flipgrid.
My first tip would have to be to just get started. It is hard to, oh, well, I don't have the time, or maybe I can't fit this into my lesson. Trust me. Find time, whether it be before school, right in the very morning when your kids are eating breakfast. Find the time to fit in that little time with Flipgrid for your students to have those conversations. I'm positive you will have such an amazing time listening, and also having them listen to some of those responses. My second tip would have to be make sure you carve out some good time in your block if you want to have a lesson. Um, because it does take time for the students to record. Some of them want to be perfectionists and want to make sure that their voice is clear and they're coming on strong, and so it will take a little bit of time. So my tip would be to allow that time for your students to record. And of course, the last one, just to have fun, because at the end of the day, students' voice matters, and it's important for your school community. And if you give them that time and that meaningful time to actually record and get their voice out there, you will see the rewards at the end. So I leave you with this. If you need any help, or if you just want to get started, you can hit me up on Twitter. I'm always glad to get teachers connected with Flipgrid. Their community is amazing at supporting. So if you have any questions, there's a bunch of people on the Flipgrid community that can help you just get started. That's how I got started on it, and it was amazing, the support that I got just from asking a question, or hey, how do I do this? There's teachers everywhere that are willing to give you their codes to their Flipgrids that you can tailor to your students' needs. That's how I got started, just looking at some of the stuff they had for my subject. And just because I teach science doesn't mean that Flipgrid is only for science. You can use it in any subject. So don't feel like, oh, I'm not a science teacher, I don't know how to incorporate it into my classroom. You can use it if you teach ELA, math, reading, any subject, even for your school community. It doesn't have to be in your classroom.
Right. I love that. In one of my past episodes, we were talking about Flipgrid, and my guest then said that Flipgrid is their customer service is like the Chick-fil-A of ed tech.
And they're not joking.
Yeah, it's like the best service. And so even like if you're on Twitter and you're sharing, and Sarah's always on Twitter, so I get to see some of the things that she posts and shares from her classroom. So I definitely will encourage you to follow her. And they also are responsive in responding back when you're tagging them online as well. And so, Sarah, what is your Twitter handle, your social media handle for people to connect with you?
So at Sara, Saray Rodriguez, and the E in Rodriguez is a 3 instead of an E. If you want to look me up, hit me up on Twitter. Let me know that you heard this podcast, and I'm glad to connect you with people that can get you started on Flipgrid. If I can't give you the answer, trust me, I'll know someone that can give you the answer that you need. And of course, literally, there'll be more than a handful of people that are willing to help you get started with Flipgrid.
Please connect with Sarah on Twitter. And I want to thank you guys for joining in. And Sarah, thank you for joining me today. It has been a pleasure to have this great conversation with you and flipping out with Flipgrid and empowering student voice. So I would like to end the show with teching may not always be easy, but it sure is fun. Thank you for listening to the Tech It Up Talk podcast with Dr. Mac, your host with the most passion for supporting educators on using and implementing technology. Be sure to connect with me on the Tech It Up Talk Facebook page and Twitter and Instagram at Tech It Up Talk or at Dr. J.E. McDonald. Now, I know teching may not always be easy, but it sure is fun.